Hey, it's Nycci Nellis, and welcome to another episode of Industry Night, the show that takes you on the deep dives of the happenings in and around the hospitality community. If you're new here, hi and welcome, and if you're old here, hi and welcome back. A little bit of background on me for those of you who are new to Industry Night. I've been covering the DC hospitality scene for the last 20 years. It all started with the list, areyouonit.com, the online e-zine that tells you absolutely everything happening in the DC metro area, openings, coming soons, promotions, and of course, every event that's going on. Of course, you follow me at NYCCI, Nellis, on all the platforms, but especially Instagram, because I'm definitely doing more of my work there. And this show, Industry Night, which is now available on YouTube, and of course, all your podcast platforms. We're going to be celebrating 8 years on air in January. There's Foodie and the Beast every Sunday at 11 a.m. on 1500. That show will be celebrating 16 years in October. That is DC's only food and wine variety show. Yeah, I think that's me. I think that's pretty much what I do. And I want to welcome you back to Barrel Oak. This is a vineyard and a brewery. I've been coming out here for the last 4 episodes. It's in beautiful Delaplane. It is so beautiful here. If you've checked out my Instagram feed, you've certainly seen shots of the vineyard and the beers and the wines and the food that's here. And it's my last date here because it's a 4-episode gig. So take it all in because it's amazing. And I'm so incredibly grateful to the team here for hosting this show for the last 4 episodes. And as I mentioned, it's only a 60-minute ride out here. And I just love the ride because you start like on this 4-lane highway and then you're on a 2-lane highway and then you're like on this 1-lane road. And like each degradation, I don't know, as you go down, your just blood pressure gets lower and lower, and it's just so fantastic. And there's so much to do out here other than just hanging out at Barrel Oak. I took a hike after one of my episodes at Lost Mountain, which is one of my favorite hikes. I stopped by Jarad Slipp's Tremello. He was on the show, but I also had dinner at his restaurant in Middleburg and schmied around there. I stopped in Marshall and got some goodies at Red Truck Bakery. Their coffee cake is to die for. And I'm kind of obsessed with the whole ox. They have a magnificent bison burger, but they also have a regular smash burger. And I can't decide which I like better, but they're both delicious. And I am really hoping to get to Field and Main, maybe today, because that is one of my all-time favorite restaurants, and they have an incredible wine list. The other cool part about doing the show out here is all the guests I've been able to bring here. So Jarad Slipp was on. Of course, I had Jeremy Ligon, who is the winemaker here, but he brought in Jason Murray of Arterra. Scott Drewno and Danny Lee were here last week, brought a little DC out into the country. Which is even more exciting because we have done wine here, but we have not done beer here. So there's the winery and the brewery. So I brought with me good friend, beer guru, and beverage director and partner of Neighborhood Restaurant Group, Greg Engert. He's out here with me today, and I'll be bringing him on in just a little bit. But first and foremost, did you know that August is Virginia Craft Beer Month? I did my research, and it is. So there's more than 200 craft breweries throughout Virginia, and Virginia is named, I'm just reading my notes here, one of the top 7 beer destinations by the Travel Channel. So it's no surprise that like the state dedicates an entire month of August to beer. And with me to talk about beer is John Bowman. He is the brewmaster here at Barrel Oak, and this brewery was named Virginia Brewery of the Year at the 2024 New York International Beer Competition, thanks to John. And his brews include the award-winning Chocolate Lab Porter, which won a gold medal. And he's got all these beers here, and we're going to talk beer, so I'm very excited. Hi, John.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. I'm excited to be here.
I am so thrilled to have you here. So tell me how you got into beer.
How I got into beer? Well, it starts pretty traditional.
Okay. You were just drinking it as a kid?
Yes.
Okay.
My father drank Old Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first beer.
Okay.
But anyway, like many brewers, I was a home brewer. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I was involved in a brew pub
Okay.
near Asheville, North Carolina. Unfortunately, we had to let our brewer go.
Okay. I feel like there's some gossip there, but we'll get
Yeah,
into that off air. We'll get into that later.
We won't get into those details.
Okay.
But suffice to say, we made the hard decision to let him go.
Fair enough.
My opinion was we were going to get brewers in. This was a small three barrel brew pub.
Let me cut to the chase. Did you become the brewmaster
I
there?
became the brewmaster.
Okay.
Rather than
I saw where this was going. But so how did you know, like, did you study it? How did you know about the flavors you wanted? I know you were a home brewer, but going from home brewing to larger production
it's a leap.
It's a big step.
It's a leap. I worked with our brewer for a lot. I brought in a consultant for a couple of weeks. We worked 15-hour days for several weeks, and he really filled in the gaps for me.
Okay.
Online resources, I mean, come on,
they're available?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my first beers were okay, and I've been doing this 12 years, and every year they have gotten better.
So for those who don't know what that means, like for me, what was a beer that you were like one of your early beers where you're like, I mean, this is good, but what did you do to make it better? How did you round it out or get the flavor out of it?
The perfect example of that is IPA.
Okay, great.
I made a good IPA. Now I make a great IPA. It's nuances, hop selection, dry hopping techniques, trying different things, different combinations, and I still tweak it. To this day, almost every batch, I tweak a little bit.
Okay.
So it's. I think nuance is the best word, and experience.
Sure. Well, that goes hand in hand, right? I mean, my first interview in person was fine, right? But I didn't have the energy, and I was so nervous, and I didn't trust myself to be able to do it. So I'm sure it's very similar. So what brought you here to Barrel Oak? And when did Barrel Oak, it started as a winery, right? When did the brewery come into existence?
Barrel Oak's been a winery, I want to say 14 years.
Okay, so when did the brewery happen?
8 years ago.
Okay.
Well, we're in our 8th year, I guess. So the room we're in now, the original owner built this room on just for the brewery.
Okay.
And the brewery is directly below us.
Okay, cool.
In the basement.
In
what
the
I call the
basement.
dungeon.
Right, the dungeon. We haven't seen the dungeon.
Actually, it's called the cave.
Okay, fair enough. It's better
cave.
than the dungeon.
We'll call it the cave. So yeah, 8 years.
And how long have you been here?
I've been here 3.5 years.
But why did they decide to do a brewery as well? Do you know? Because I know there's new owners now.
Well, the original owner saw the opportunity, what beer would bring to a winery, and he was very instrumental in getting the laws changed, because back then you couldn't have a brewery and a winery in the same location.
Right, because that makes sense.
And Barrel Oak was either the first or second
Right.
winery to put in a brewery, and now you see it all over the place.
And so you have, we have a bunch of beers in front of us. You have a bunch of SKUs. How many beers are in production at any given time? You're canning them. You have a bunch on tap here. How do you go about doing that? And what is your goal for? I don't know. Is it every month or do you have do you know how many you want to have and then you create them? How do you go about producing all the beers?
Well, I'm very lucky because I have a lot of creative freedom here. No one's on my back telling me do this, do that.
Okay.
We have 10 taps, so that dictates. We
So
want 10 different beers at all times.
10 different beers, and then you put them in cans as well.
Yes.
Okay.
We have our core beers, not cores.
Right, I was like, wait a second. Okay.
Like the IPA, the Chocolate Lab, the Seltzer,
I want to get
which
into
is not a
seltzers
beer,
in
but
second.
a seltzer.
Are
And
you
the lager.
You're pouring me something. What am I trying?
Yeah, let's try that. We're going to try the El Jefe.
The El Jefe, because that's the spicy one, right?
This is the spicy habanero mango.
Not your
hazy.
favorite. So is it
I
fruity?
personally-
Is it fruity?
You get the mango in there.
Huh.
I wouldn't call it fruity.
Okay.
You get the spice back here
Uh-huh.
in the aftertaste.
Sure. Just a little taste.
I'm not a huge spiced beer fan, but people love this beer. And we did it in conjunction with the El Jefe food truck, who comes out here
Oh, sure.
frequently.
Well, cheers. Thank you.
Cheers,
Okay.
my dear.
Um,
I smell the mango.
I smell the mango, but I smell the pepper. Do you know what I mean? Like the spice. Like it singes a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
It just gets you right here. This is the second year we've done this. It was so popular.
I bet it's popular. It's fun. It's different. I think it's unique. I mean, you still get the beer, the hoppy flavor of beer.
Yes.
I don't taste mango. Because I was expecting it to be sweet with a bitter taste afterwards, like a strong taste afterwards.
Right.
And that's not it. It's really interesting.
I believe now that we're tasting it, maybe the mango has diminished. This is probably 3 months old, and that could be what's happening.
Interesting.
That flavors do change over time, just like wine.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about seasonally what's like going to be on tap for the fall.
Good question.
You're figuring it out?
Well, that's an easy one because Oktoberfest.
Oh, sure.
And that's a traditional German lager. And we're going to have an Oktoberfest day or weekend here, I believe in late September. And then I do a beer called the Oktoberfest is called Copper Acorn, traditional lager. And then I do a beer called Punk Monk.
Okay, what's that one?
That is a Belgian monk. And the punk is for pumpkin.
That's what I figured. But are we doing the spice or no, pumpkin?
That is a pumpkin spiced ale.
Okay.
With cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla. It's delicious.
I bet it's really popular. Okay, quickly, before we wrap up, seltzers.
Seltzers.
How does a seltzer go hand in hand with a brewery? Can you explain it to me?
For one, it's a gluten-free option.
Okay, fair enough.
For two, people that don't necessarily enjoy a beer, they might look for a seltzer, or we don't offer cider, but it's the same kind of idea.
Right.
So it's appealing to that wider crowd.
Gotcha.
And our seltzer does phenomenal.
Okay, great. Well, so tell everybody, please, we're here at Barrel Oak. Can they only find you in the cave, or can they find you like on the tap?
I'm usually in the cave.
Okay. All right. Don't look for him. He's not coming out to talk to you. But
anyone who comes out,
they want to geek out.
they can say, "Hey, is John here?"
Okay, great.
They'll come find me,
All right.
and I'll come up
Thanks
out
so
of the
much.
cave.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Enjoyed
I appreciate
it. Yeah.
Thanks. It was so nice chatting with John Bowman. What they're doing out here at Barrel Oak is so exciting. The brewery, the winery, there's a seltzer. There's so much going on, and it's so beautiful out here. But now to like the main course of my show, Greg Engert. So Greg and I both kind of came up in the hospitality industry like at the same time. I think the two of us are always like so excited to get together because we get to sort of see where each other is at and what we're doing, and sort of get our take on the industry and where things are going, given that we've been doing this for like well over 20 years, although you don't look a day over, the day I met you. So just a quick recap. Greg is one of those people in the country who really changed the conversation about beer. I'm just going to read his bio, but in a really fun and exciting way. His expertise has earned him accolades galore, including Food and Wine Som of the Year. I think it was the first time they did that. And Imbibe's Beer Person of the Year. And he actually has been on Foodie and the Beast, I think more times than any other guest. I think he gets like 2 jackets as well. And so here's the thing that I think is really interesting. When you walk into a restaurant today in 2024, most restaurants have a wine list, a cocktail list, and a beer list. 30 years ago, you were lucky if there was a wine list, and you could just order cocktails. But the conversation about beers and beverage programs has changed drastically in the last 30 years, and I really believe that Greg Engert is one of the people that we can thank him for. He's been a part of Neighborhood Restaurant Group for how long?
18 years.
18 years. But diversity on the menus is important to him, and we're going to get into that today. So, hi.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Thank you.
So good.
Any chance to talk to you is a great day for me. So
It's
great to be
always
here.
fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so just for those who don't know you, and I don't know how that's possible, your beer story. Like, I know you were in school in Vermont, like a good school. Like, I'm sure your mother was like, beer? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, I think my parents and my family in general were always into food and drink growing up. So it was not like a weird thing for me to go off to college and continue to imbibe and come of age and learn about it. I think, I went to school in Middleburg College in Vermont and then Georgetown for grad school. So I was supposed to be an English professor. That's what I thought I was going to be. That petered out after a couple of years in DC, and a friend of mine who I had gone to school with was an actor in DC, so of course, therefore, he was also bartending at a place called the Brickskeller.
Which was like the only, like it was one of the few like beer places, like they had beers from all over the world.
Yeah, in 1957 it opened with 25 different beers on the menu, which is insane back then. It was America's first beer bar. It's no longer with us, unfortunately, but it was the place to be. I started bartending there. Not really knowing what I was getting myself into, and I traded books for beers and started studying like beer and hospitality and service, then eventually wine and spirits and cocktails with the same kind of passion.
But would you call Brickskeller like a place, they did not focus on quality beers. It was more about
anything they could get their hands on.
It was like, we just want, like, I remember like, they had a pineapple beer and everybody was like, oh my God.
But back then that was important, right? Just first part was to show the world that there was this much beer out there beyond Bud and Miller.
Okay, speaking of beer, yes, John Bowman, what do you got for us?
I'm back. You can't do this without beers.
No, that's true.
Thank you.
Let's do it.
I have our bestseller lager.
Okay.
Great summertime, refreshing lager.
Beautiful.
Subtle notes of citrus on there.
And
this, something a little heavier, is our Sassy Goat Saison.
Terrific.
Classic notes, white pepper, some coriander, all the good Belgian stuff.
Yum.
Awesome.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, great.
So I think, so if you look back, I mean, it's amazing. Like, here we are in Delaplane, Virginia, an incredible winery that also has an amazing brewery. That would have been unheard of 25 years ago.
Of course.
And I think the Brickskeller was doing what they should have done to start. They did the first necessary.
They broke ground.
They had it, and they had a lot of beer.
Right.
But yes, there was no service, there was no training, there was no temperature controls or care and concern given to it.
Glassware.
The food was like it was pub grub, but it was amazing because everybody, the who's who of beer, would go there. And I got to rub elbows with Garrett Oliver and Sam Calagione, Ken Grossman, you name it, the biggest names in beer would stop through because beer simply was not big in the early 2000s.
Sure.
But from there, I was able to say, like, how can I take the best of this experience and start to try to continue to be inspired by sommeliers and mixologists and things like that, and bring beer to the level that all of the passion that had been being poured into beer making wasn't being reflected at the table or at the bar or at the retail counter. And so that was my goal then. It kind of hit me. Started to look into a business plan, but then serendipitously I met Michael Babin, the founder of Neighborhood Restaurant Group and one of the greatest guys ever in the industry and beyond. He had started our first concept in '97. He had 4 by the time I met him, and we joined forces.
Was Rustico already open when you met him?
Yeah, so March of 2006, Rustico opened,
right.
And it was a beer bar. And at that time, I swear, inside the Beltway in DC, you could probably get craft beer on draft at 3 places in 2006.
In 2006, was Sierra Nevada craft beer? Like, what was considered craft beer?
And you would see that around mostly in bottles. But craft beer was everything that wasn't Bud Miller Coors, but even like maybe Guinness or Pilsner or Kel. Like after that, that was what you saw.
That's it.
And then Rustico had opened in March of 2006 with like 30 drafts. I came in, we tweaked the program and started changing service and things like that. And the food element and pairing aspect got elevated. But then we decided, like, we want to do more of this. And that's eventually when 3 years later, we would open our first concept in DC, Church Key, in 2009.
But how did you build on that? How did you build on your beer knowledge? Like, again, I feel like stars were aligning, right? You wanted a beer, you and Michael wanted this beer-centric restaurant.
Yep.
with good food, real, really like good food and hospitality as well as a restaurant concept. But at the same time, I mean, it's like coffee, like third wave. Like we're in this new wave. Laws are changing.
Yeah.
Breweries are opening up. People, beer lovers who are home brewing, much like John earlier,
totally.
are now like, oh, I can make this a business.
Yeah.
So like that was sort of percolating at the same time as you guys opening up Church Key, Birch and Barley. So how did that? It's such an exciting time.
It's all luck. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like anybody who's had any modicum of success will say that you were in the right place at the right time.
Sure.
Like 100%. Now, I think but to your point, I think you kind of feed the beast as well as react to the beast, and we were pushing it. And I think this goes to something you and I have discussed ad nauseum. It's like hand-to-hand hospitality at the restaurant and bar. When we started at Rustico in 2006, nobody knew what craft beer was.
Right.
And in fact, this is Northern Virginia back in 2006. People were a little bit hesitant to, for like new concepts from DC people, in the burbs. And they were kind of like, they looked a little bit strangely at what we were doing. So we came up with a process to make it accessible and make it fun. And if the bartenders and servers love what they're doing, and they're zealots like you are, and they can proselytize like you want them to, you can make anybody excited about what you're doing. And then if you have great stuff to back it up, it's a win-win.
Sure.
And I think that's what happened. So I've mentioned this probably to you before. Third Wave Coffee is a great example. Nobody drank coffee in 2006 or even 2009. There weren't people like interested in third wave coffee in DC then, but as it came up, and makers started really concentrating on it, then I think the next level is the hospitality people to take it up and really do the work on the front lines.
Sure.
And it magically came together for us. We were super lucky.
I think you make a really good point. It's the passion. Like I always saw from you, you were so passionate, not just about beer, but about what you were sharing with other people
100%.
And the concepts and how like a place like Church Key, which is still considered one of the preeminent beer halls,
in the country,
without a doubt. Like how, like all the beer geeks go there. Don't get me wrong, but anybody can go there and have an incredible experience because the staff who works there is able to share the stories and the narratives, and I think that that's so important. And you also have a consumer now who wants those narratives. Who wants
that. And I mean, listen, I think it's no secret to people who watch your show, like you're not a beer geek.
Right.
You'll drink some beers from time to time.
I'm having some
I know
now.
your true heart lies, and that's with cocktails and wines and things like that. So one of the things that's always been important for us from the minute we opened Church Key was to have an incredible cocktail and spirit selection and wine selection. And you can't temperature control your beers and not have your wines at the perfect time either. So we have that there. So we kind of always have, we have the narrative for the beer, but in general, we want people to drink and eat what they want when they come in, and getting the staff to be passionate about all of it has been super important. But I can say without a doubt, and this has been a struggle for us as we've expanded. It's like passion gets kind of diluted over time because we can't, like when Church Key opened, in 2009, I was at Church Key. From 2009 to 2012, I was there every single day.
Sure.
Then we opened a brewery called Blue Jacket.
Right.
And suddenly I was spread. So you have to come up with ways, and this is very difficult, to get the staff that's constantly changing over, especially since the pandemic, to love this stuff like you do. And especially with a bigger group, that is our challenge every day.
I have no doubt.
Well,
so let's just list some of, because so Church Key, you have the brewery, you have the Rusticos, Evening Star, you have 20?
Yes. Yeah, it's hard to say because there's like concepts versus locations because we have multiples of some, but about like we say like over 20 different concepts. And I think one way to think about it is we have this beer group, right? That includes Church Key, Blue Jacket, our brewery in Navy Yard.
Right.
The Sovereign, which is our Belgian spot in Georgetown, which is crushing it. Georgetown is, as you know, cool
Coming
again.
Back. And
it's amazing.
It looks great.
So fun. Owen's Tavern and Garden up in Pike and Rose in Maryland.
Which
connected
also has Caruso's.
Caruso's, which we'll talk about that. You know, Shelter, which is our beer bar at the Roost. But yeah, then we have this incredible and I think singular food hall experience called The Roost in Southeast DC on 14th Street, which has the Carusos.
Listen, when I first met Michael, Michael has wanted a food hall his entire life.
Before anybody was talking about food halls, I want to mention.
I was at
before Union Market.
Right, before Union Market. We had a meeting.
Yes.
He brought me in, and Amber Fow was there. There was a bunch of people there, and he's like,
it's probably 2007.
I have this idea, and this is what it looks like. It was very building-ish, but he was talking about the Union Market area, I think.
Yeah.
I don't even know where he was talking about, but I was like...
And he was talking to the people down at the wharf way back in the day, too.
And at that time, I was like, dude, I'm not driving down there. I was so myopic. Because I didn't understand the larger plan, what was happening, not just nationally, but what was happening in DC as far as real estate and how that was going. So he's
100%.
always had a vision. He's always been a visionary, I guess is my point. And
100%.
The Roost is the execution of the food hall I think he's always wanted.
Yes.
Can you explain
that has
it a little
evolved
bit?
over time based on how we've seen things go. Because again, so you mentioned Evening Star, Vermilion, Iron Gate, Caruso's, Mallard, which is opening soon. We'll talk about that. These are chef-driven restaurants that we've had, and we've had many others that didn't make it through the pandemic and otherwise.
Right.
That was our bread and butter kind of to start. Then we've always been beverage heavy. I mean, when Tallulah opened in 2004, I think we had 50 wines by the glass.
Wow.
And on Washington Boulevard over there.
Yeah.
No longer with us, but an incredible place. Nate Anda, who's a big part of our group.
What was the other concept? Because Michael always likes to do multiple concepts in a concept.
It was called Daily Planet, and it was like a wine shop that was within.
But wasn't there something like Eat?
Eat Bar, of course. Yes,
Bar,
that was
right?
the bar. Yeah.
Yes.
Which we replicated again. Well, not replicated, but we revived on Barracks Road before the pandemic.
Right.
And I mentioned Nathan Anda. He's one of our chefs. He does barbecue with us now and so many other things.
Right.
Because we have that. We've always been beverage heavy. We have all these beer places I mentioned.
Right.
But to your point, the food hall idea, which I think today still, there's nothing like the Roost anywhere. Anywhere. Because so often food halls are either, if you go back to the Ferry Building, they're like markets.
Yes.
Which is cool if you can support it. Amazing.
Exactly.
But that's hard to support. The other option is a food court. A lot of developers.
Which a lot of these new food halls have a more food
court. Exactly, because a developer wants to buy a building.
Yeah.
They want to put in a bunch of food court vendors like they would at a mall. They want them to pay them.
Yes.
And they want it to just run itself.
Yeah.
But that's become stale quickly, and there's no service aspect. And honestly, getting all of those vendors to work together to make a synergistic whole is impossible. So what we said was, we're going to do a food hall that's, of course, going to be beverage heavy. I mean, the Roost has a 50-tap temperature-controlled beer bar called Shelter, and then we have Show of Hands, which has
a cocktail bar,
200 whiskeys, tons of amazing cocktails that are always on rotation.
Right?
That's Nick Farrell's baby with the team on site there. So we anchor with that. Then we have all of these really cool stalls. We have an incredible coffee shop called Cameo with Kenya Useda, who's our coffee director. She kills it over there. We have Caruso's on the other side, which is a Matt Adler's red sauce joint that's beautiful and perfect for the neighborhood. But we're not asking you to come in and go up to the burger stall Red Apron and get a burger and sit down. We're like, no. Sit at your table. Use a QR code to get started. We have servers that are going to come around, and you can get anything you want in that whole food hall brought to your table.
Right.
You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to gather up your friends or reserve tables. And we're going to give you silverware. We're going to give you linens. We're going to fill up your water glasses that are not plastic with filtered water that we produce in the kitchen. You know what I mean? And just try to make this an experience. And it has been a remarkable success. We opened it at the end of the middle of the pandemic.
In the middle of the pandemic, because I was there.
Yeah, we couldn't even have people inside. We were doing to-go and delivery. That's the other thing. With 6 to 8 vendors, you're sitting at home tonight and you want sushi, and your husband or wife wants pizza, your kids want burgers. We could make these massive orders from all the different stalls and send it to you. So it just really clicks on lots of levels.
But I think, you brought up something, and we've talked about this. And actually, when Scott Drewno was on the show last week, we talked about it. Because, I think a lot of people hear QR codes today. People are like, QR code, just give me a menu, right?
Yeah.
But what I love that you guys are doing there, because to me, my problem with the QR code was also the problem with how Scott started Chico. He's like, I want you to come up. I want you to order everything. I'm going to bring it out to you.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, then I'm going to have to come up 6 times because I don't want all the food on the table at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
I like a coursed
Exactly.
meal, and I like to eat a lot. So,
Yeah.
but I don't
Yeah.
I don't want it all at once.
Right.
So what I love at the Roost is that I have because you guys are so tech forward.
Yeah.
I have the ability to be like, okay, I'm going to start with this, and then I can go back and order and start with that. Like I don't close
100%.
out my bill.
And if
know
you
what
and I
mean?
are having a conversation and we're halfway through our beers and our dumplings are just about done, our server comes by and goes, hey, sorry to interrupt. Can I get you guys another round? Or do you want some more dumplings?
Right.
And we're going to go,
Yeah.
and keep our conversation going. It's not like you have to pull your phone out every 5
Get
minutes and keep
distracted.
ordering. But then the beautiful thing about the QR code is when you're done, you just go pay and you can leave.
Right.
No like waiting for the server and stuff like that. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. I mean, listen, like we're old school, we're traditionalists, we like classic service.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've done a good job of incorporating new opportunities, being tech savvy, without losing what we all love so much about hospitality at the same
Right.
time. So
Well, I think I think probably post-pandemic finding hospitality has been really tough.
yeah,
You know, I mean, a lot of people left the industry,
Yep.
but also a lot of people who are now in the industry, not only is there a learning curve, but understanding patrons, understanding
yeah.
what hospitality
Reading
looks
guests.
like.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
We're
Like,
starting from scratch.
Yeah, we're starting from
Which
scratch.
we took that for granted for 30 years. I mean, like, you'd hire people, you know, sometimes they had bad habits,
Right.
but they kind of had a base understanding of steps of service,
Mm-hmm.
and it could turn it on if they knew you wanted it. They wanted to be, you know, great at their jobs. But now a lot of people are coming in, they have no, it's kind of nice as a blank slate, but it's a lot more to work on. Plus,
Right.
labor costs are through
Sky
the roof.
high, right.
So a lot of places are streamlining service, which can leave us all kind of wanting more when we go out to bars and restaurants.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, listen, some places have amazing service.
Yep.
And I've been to some of the best places that do have amazing service, but sometimes people have an off night or, you know,
Yes,
listen,
yeah.
patrons are also part of the problem.
Yeah.
Like, I'm totally aware. You have to go, it's a 50-50. It is a relationship.
It should be,
You
yeah.
have to go in on your best behavior, and you should expect nothing but the best behavior in return, right?
Yeah.
It should be a mirror on both sides.
If I can touch on that really quickly,
Yeah.
because so one of the things that I do as I'm one of the partners in the group, I oversee Beverage, but I also do a lot with marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I read every review that comes in about all 20 of these places
Wow.
every day. It's painful, but it's not actually that painful, and that's why I want to bring it up. I think for a long time, it was fashionable for people in the industry to denigrate Yelp and Open Table and all these places that gave, you know, guests kind of a, I don't know, like an anonymous way to talk smack on places, right? And believe me, especially years ago, that was the case. But I want to go on record and say that when I read these reviews, are there outliers? And especially because I'm reading them in such a large group of restaurants, you know what I mean? I'm not just focused. I'm able to see this across 20 places that, yes, are there errant reviews that should be discarded and never looked at? Of course.
Right.
How often do they happen? Not often. I would say that most reviews are pretty thoughtful.
Okay.
I think that they're pretty honest. I think that they're positive for the most part. And I'm not just saying that because we have our ups and downs, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
but like when they are critical, once we get past, you know, defensiveness, I think we all are kind of like, yeah, I can
Okay.
see that probably being true. And at this point, I mean, it's become a way of life, so you can't get around it anyways.
Right.
I think my and our team's experience, like nobody likes, you know, for me to send an email being like, what happened with this table?
Right.
But at the end of the day, the hospitality to get those people to come back and have a good time and possibly become your best friends, that opportunity is incredible.
exists.
I mean, when I was bartending, when I first got started, there are people that, I mean, came to my wedding that I still see today that were regulars of mine that were the nastiest, like most negative interactions when they first came into Rustico in 2006.
Oh.
But like they were having a bad day.
Right.
We fixed it, and now we're best friends. And those same people still go to Rustico 18 years later,
Right.
like 3 or 4 times a week. You know what I mean? So I guess I've come around to thinking that there's a lot to be said for online reviews, and that they could be a pretty helpful
tool.
Tool,
I think
especially
they are
managing a
tool.
larger group.
So it's so funny. So like for me, like when I started the List Are You On It,
Yeah.
which is, it's now 21 years ago.
Just wild.
I know, it's crazy. But when I started, you know, Yelp and all those things started a couple of years later. But AOL at that time, because that was a thing, they you could put reviews on AOL, and the Washington Post had a comment section. Like these were comment sections. So I would get emails, mostly from men, I must add, with their reviews. They're like, hey, look, I was published in the Washington Post. I want you to see my review.
Published. Yeah.
And
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, dude, that's comments. But I was always like, oh my God, that's so great, blah, blah, blah. But I have had people over the years sort of come to me and be like, hey, you should know this about this restaurant. And it's usually a rant, and it's usually very negative. The first time it happened to me, it was about one of the best restaurants in the city, brand new restaurant with a very hot young chef. And what the guy wrote was really terrible. And I, being naive, I forwarded it to the chef, and I was like, hey, don't shoot the messenger, but this guy's out there saying this stuff, and I want you to know.
Yeah.
And he wrote me back, and he's like, hey, he's like, thank you for sending this to me. He's sending it like he had sent it to Tom.
However,
he sent
yeah.
it to Jessica,
Yeah.
like, or Jessica wasn't there, but whoever was Todd Kleiman and all those people.
Todd, probably, yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, I want to explain myself. I was like, no, you don't have to explain yourself to me. I was like, I read between
You just want to make sure that, yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
if somebody was saying this kind of shit about me, I would want
Would
to know.
want to know, exactly.
And, you know, over the years with Yelp and Open Table and all these things, yes, I see the value for the restaurants.
Right.
But I also, some of them I read and I'm like, this person
Oh, they're
just,
ridiculous. Or I was
they just want
like,
to free me
I
up.
think
They
for
just
me,
want
it's
something free.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? I get annoyed at that. It's
For
abusive.
sure. But it's part of, it's just part of the game
gig,
now. And
I
I will say
know.
that, like, listen, I like trolls and rants, they happen. They're abominable. They should not be, you know, like,
Right.
they're ridiculous. But I will say, though, that, like, if you just, and Yelp is honestly less than, I think most of the reviews we get now are from Google. And Open Table, too, because they, you know, they ask for it.
Yeah.
But I just have to say that very rarely are they people trying to, like, make a point. And you're right, yes, is there entitlement? Of course. But I would also go on record to say that we all are encouraging the entitlement, right? Like, if somebody tells you that they have an anniversary, we look at that as a hospitality opportunity.
Sure.
They come in, you hit them with some sparkling when they sit down, 5 stars. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
we're all part of this game, and like, and you're doing that. So in some ways, I think we feed the entitlement a little bit. I think after a while, if you go in and people are rewarding you for having a birthday or a celebration,
Well, listen,
know.
you are hitting on a thing that I really have an issue with.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, so it's your birthday. Why do they have to do something for you? Like, I
Yeah.
totally come from the other side. I think restaurants have fed the beast for a really long
They have.
time. And now people are like, well, I mean, I had to wait 20 minutes. They should give me a drink. And I'm like,
I know.
I had
It goes
to wait,
a bit too far, yeah.
I had to wait an hour at my doctor. I'm not getting Botox for free. So,
Exactly.
like, come on. Like,
But I will say, if you go to make an online reservation, you probably don't do this that often. I think people take care of these things for you. But if you go to Open Table to make a reservation,
because I'm an elitist. Go ahead.
no, you're connected. You don't need to do this. But if you do, if you come down below here and go on,
Yes.
it says, are you celebrating a birthday?
It does
So if you
ask.
say yes,
Then what are you asking for?
yeah,
Okay,
when you go
good
check
point.
my, yeah, so that's all I'm saying. But
All
like,
right,
but either
fair.
way, I mean, and at the end of the day, we know that, like, when you hook somebody up with something like that, which if you're pricing it right, I mean, it's a small little thing
It's
that
nothing.
you've adjusted for. The chances that they're going to have a better time are massive. And like the last thing I'll say on that, it's like we always say, if you get a drink in somebody's hands, whether it's boozy or spirit free, within 6 minutes of them sitting at the table, the likelihood of them loving their experience has gone up exponentially.
Without a doubt.
So-
there is nothing worse, and I really do feel this way when you're sitting there and you're like, "Where's my drink?" I mean, even if it's a glass of water, do you know what I mean? Like
You feel like you're not being-
It
yes,
hasn't
yeah.
started. Like the night has not started. Everybody's waiting. Conversations can't flow because people are like anticipating.
Yes.
So I agree with you. All right,
Yeah.
we could talk hospitality
Yeah,
for hours,
sorry.
but we're going to move on. So let's talk about the DC craft beer scene because we have gone through you and I together have been through a tremendous pendulum swing of no craft beers to crazy amount of craft beers to now, like, we're losing people.
A softening, yeah,
The
totally.
market got oversaturated. Talk me through it a little bit because it's not just it's just not local. That's a national.
It's national,
trend.
and I can tell you that it's also, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a reminder of the fact that we're all getting older. Restaurants, trends, interests, they change, and they change quickly. And I never would have thought this back in the day, but it was so when I first got involved with craft beer the way I did, it was not cool. It was like the Brickskeller on 22nd and P. People went there, they loved it, it was fun. You maybe have a beer that you had when you studied abroad in Kenya or something.
The other beer place in town was Yards.
Yeah.
But only because they put the beer
in a yard. Yeah, so it was all experience driven, which we could get back to because we're getting back to that now. But it was like, you would go to the Brickskeller because, well, first of all, I think 10% of the amount of bars and restaurants that we have in DC today existed in 2004. Let's put that into perspective.
Right.
So everybody was busier. The population was less, but not by 90%. So we were just busy anyways. You had a lot of people, this is pre-Yelp, pre-Rate Beer, Untapped, Beer Advocate, kind of could do whatever you wanted, and people would flood this place, and a lot of people would be like, oh, well, I studied abroad in like I said, like Kenya, so I want to have Tusker, even though that Tusker bottle was probably 2 years old, but it was still like a nostalgic thing, whatever. And so but it was under the radar. People didn't care about beer. I like to think that, yes, it started to happen. We started to help it happen. 2006, 7, 8, it got massive. But 20 years ago, everybody was 20 years younger, had fewer kids, live in different places. And I think craft beer in 2004 was cool because your parents hadn't drank it, right? Everybody was drinking, your parents drank Bud, Miller, Coors, industrial swill. Obviously people were getting interested in things that they loved to drink, right? Handcrafted things, farmers markets. I mean, we were far away. Alice Waters is 30 years in at this point, but coffee was coming, spirits were coming, American wine, including Virginia wine, was coming. It was happening.
Also the laws were changing.
And the laws were changing to permit this to happen.
You couldn't have a distillery. You couldn't have a brewery. Like, these things were not.
Yeah, DC was brew pubs only. You couldn't have a production facility.
You couldn't even do it. So
exactly.
the laws.
So all this, the confluence of things comes together for people to lose their minds about flavors like this from beer.
Right.
But nothing gold can stay, and everybody, like, if you get, we know this, I mean, if something's popular and exciting, it's eventually going to become old hat. I think what we're seeing now is the kids who were coming into Church Key today were 5.
Right.
Or 10 when Church Key opened. Like, you have to think about that. And DC is such a transient city too, that we are constantly having to say, like, we don't forget about us. Like, we're here. Like, you think Blue Jacket and Navy Yard, everybody knows about it? No, those apartment buildings are flipping over all the time. And craft beer is now what their dads drink. And there's some interesting TikTok videos of little boys and girls taking secret videos of their dads drinking at breweries to joke about them. So it's like, it's not what it used to be.
Okay.
At the same time though, people are interested in flavors, right? So they want seltzer with stuff in it. They're not as committed to grapes and grain and distillates. They're more about flavor. And I think that's been really good for cocktail people because they can adjust to that. But I think that's the fight we're in right now for beer. And we're trying to figure out ways to make it cool again.
Right.
And we have some good ideas for that, but it's something that we're fighting.
That's very interesting, because I wondered if the market was just oversaturated.
That's part of it.
Because there was the local beat, like the drum beat. It's gotta be local, it's gotta be local, it's gotta be local. You remember Michael Birkenall? Remember who, RIP, who passed away a couple years ago, but I remember we would go into a restaurant and he would be like, everybody's saying that everything is local, but the wine program isn't local and their beer program isn't local. He really had a thorn on that one. But but now I think you're seeing, and I mentioned this in the opening, the diversification of beverage menus. Yeah, you can have local, but you can also have something really cool from someplace else.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? It can be more open-minded.
Yeah. And I think also saturation is, as we know, things get saturated, they're not cool anymore. It's it's too obvious.
Right.
And I think with saturation comes a lowering of certain standards. Not every brewery is going to be great if there's 10,000 of them.
Right.
And so, same with wineries, same with restaurants and cocktail bars. And Michael Birkenall, I haven't thought about him in years, but he was a curmudgeon.
He was.
But
he was our
curmudgeon. And he was an honest perspective. He knew what he liked. And I think he was reacting to like this like just effulgence of just like stuff.
Right.
And how do you, what makes sense? And I think it's, now we're seeing with craft beers that it is kind of softening, and hopefully the best survive. But we're going to have to get young people excited about drinking beer again.
Right. Well, and also then there's the whole conversation, which we're not going to go down the rabbit hole, but of non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
Right? So like my husband is
Booming.
actually drinking non-alcoholic beers.
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, he's not a huge alcohol guy anyway.
No, he likes to have a beer too.
But he likes to have a beer every now and again. And when he started buying non-alcoholic beers, I was like, if I could raise an eyebrow, I would. I was like, what are you doing? So that is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Because that also...
We should do a whole other show on that.
I know,
honestly.
because I think now non-alcoholic, not just beers, but non-alcoholic drinkers
Everything.
changes the bill at the end of the day. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like if somebody has a mocktail, I'm just going to say this one thing. If somebody's like, I'm not drinking, I'm going to have a mocktail. They'll drink that mocktail, but they're not ordering another one.
No, because there's the
That's
buzz
it.
isn't. It's not like you're not invited to another.
No,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, after I have my second glass of wine, I'm definitely having a third.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
You don't
Like
see
that's
that as
what's
much.
going on.
And honestly, I will say I'm glad to see that people are actually charging for NA drinks.
Yes.
What they should, because it used to be this thing was like, if cocktails are 12, NA should be 8. It's like,
no, it shouldn't.
You're sitting in a seat. We need that check average.
Yeah, keep it the same.
And a lot of thoughts going into it too. So that's been good too. But you're right. It's very rare as the person who's like plowing through 6 to 8 NA beers in a dinner, unless they have some kind of weird sugar thing. But I will say one thing that I'm hopeful for, I've tried this myself, not really well, is that, and we've seen it, some people will come out now, get a cocktail, then chill out with like an NA, and then come back and kind of pace themselves throughout the night. I don't know, maybe it's a pipe dream, but that's that would be perfect. If people can like kind of have 5 to 6 drinks in a night and half of them are NA, but they're still social and active, like that would be a cool balancing thing.
So you've got goals. I see where you're
I don't know if it's what
All right,
happened,
we'll see what happens there. All right, let's talk about, so you've got Mallard opening.
Yes.
You've got something going on in New Orleans.
Yep.
Let's talk about some of the new concepts and like how Mallard came to be, and then let's talk about what you're doing in New Orleans. And then we'll hit Snally.
Another thing that I think is just hard for a lot of people who maybe aren't in the business, don't understand, and those that are in the business lament, is that it's hard to keep things interesting. We just touched on this with beer.
Right.
But like restaurants, we are, I think, a singular restaurant group insofar as we keep our places open.
Yeah, you do.
Like longer than anybody else, honestly. I think Evening Star Cafe has been open since 1997.
Right.
We've changed it, we've adjusted it and everything else, but it is still going strong.
Well, but you've evolved.
We always evolve, yes.
You've always evolved.
And we refresh every few years as you have to interiorly, but like we try not to just close a business and open a new one if we can, because we just are attached to them. We are sentimental people who are doing our best to try to like survive financially, because we're not built just to make money, you know what I mean? So we keep these restaurants as long as possible. Vermilion is over 20 years old.
Amazing.
Obviously Church Key's 15. So, but at the same time, as we all know, people want new stuff constantly. And so I think we've also gotten smart about deciding when it's time to transition. So Church Key, we mentioned 2009, it opened with a really beautiful restaurant underneath it called Birch and Barley, which had a 15-year run, which is longer than most restaurants ever do.
Right.
But since the pandemic has just struggled, 14th Street and Logan Circle is a different place. It struggled to gain its footing.
Just for a little bit of history,
Yeah.
when you guys opened Church Key and then Birch and Barley, 14th Street was not 14th Street. It was just like, it was just beginning to percolate. I think the only other restaurant of note at the time was St. X up the street.
Absolutely.
And that's like...
And Bar Pilar shortly thereafter.
Right.
We had the Black Cat, which is still one of the best music venues
and the
ever.
Source was there.
And the Studio Theater and Whole Foods.
I think Whole Foods had just opened.
Yeah.
Like it was all just
dicey.
in play.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was dicey. And I mean, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that 14th Street is on the edge of 2 jurisdictions for policing. And so a lot of times, police get rewarded for having fewer arrests, which sounds kind of counterintuitive. So a lot of prostitution and drug dealing they would pick people up and just drop them off on the border. So that's one of the things that led to 14th Street being so wild in the old days. But anyways, yeah, when we came in 2009, it was like, people were like, really? And it took off like a rocket, as you remember. Yes. It totally surpassed our expectations and is just, even to this day, I can't believe it. But 15 years later, Birch struggled to really be impressive or impactful to everybody. So we are friends with lots of people in the industry.
Yep.
And we met a guy that we'd known for a long time, Hamilton Johnson. He's been cooking in DC for 20 years. Great guy, great chef.
He worked under Jeff Boobin for a long time,
exactly,
right?
Vidalia. And he came to us shopping around an idea that he had for a restaurant that was focused on Mid-Atlantic and Southern ingredients. And it just happened to coincide with us like being like, what should we do with Birch? Like, I mean, we were throwing everything against the wall.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we met Hamilton and we liked him. And that was really, I mean, really what it was. You think he's an amazing dude. Easy to work with, flexible, passionate, flexible when he should be, but also really focused on everything else and makes incredible food.
Right.
So we decided to flip Birch into Mallard, which is this, his ode to Southern and Mid-Atlantic foodways. It's outstanding. We've got, and the beverage program, of course, is like massive and amazing and like really cool. And like we have this, I will say, like, because we're in mock service right now, we have a lemonade menu, which is like 3 different house-made lemonades with different non-alcoholic bitters and things in it.
Ooh,
so for
fun.
NA, and then we spike it with different spirits based on the base. That to me, it's like if you come to Mallard, you have to start with a lemonade, NA or not. It's just so refreshing. You just crush it.
Cool.
And then we move on with the rest of the meal.
Okay.
So that's very exciting. Yeah.
That is very exciting. All right, and then, so that's opening up soon.
Yeah, Tuesday. Yeah.
Tuesday. So the show will air in 3 weeks. So it's open.
It's open.
It's open. Make your reservation. And let's talk about Snally. So Snally started, what year are we for Snallygaster?
So technically, Snallygaster started in 2007.
Okay.
In the back parking lot of Rustico in Alexandria.
Right.
That was one of the things.
I think I went to the first one.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
And I remember you there. And when we started, it was small, handful of vendors, probably 500 people in that back parking lot behind Rustico.
Was it called Snallygaster?
No.
I didn't think so.
It was called Octo.
Okay,
This is like
an
the best. Octo Beer
Oktoberfest.
Fest or
Right,
something like this.
okay.
It was just our version of Oktoberfest, but it was amazing. And then we did it in 8, in 9, in 10, and then in 2011, it got so big. And this is after Church Key had already been open for 2 years now.
Right.
So now we're bringing in people from all over the area.
Well, and if I could just interrupt to explain to people that Church Key became a hub for people around the world.
For beer. Yeah,
for
yeah.
beer.
It was massive.
Like, people are like, it was a destination. It still is.
Exactly.
People came there, they pour their beers, you tap their beers, you do panels. Like, people come
for that. And then we were able to, with great marketing, and you mentioned Amber before, has been with us over time. She has been incredible and her team, and now we're doing it as well. Just gathering people, keeping their email addresses, keeping their contact info, and inviting these parties. So we get them out to Oktoberfest at Rustico in 2011, and I think 4,000 people showed up. And there was at that time an active railroad right behind Rustico. Yeah. People were like standing on that. They were on people's lawns. So the city of Alexandria kindly asked us not to host it there any longer. And that was fine because we'd been thinking about moving it to DC anyways, especially because Blue Jacket was coming in Navy Yard. So in 2012, a year before Blue Jacket opened, we did the first Snallygaster, and that's when we decided to rebrand it. That was Michael's brainchild to call it Snallygaster, a mythical beast that used to terrorize the people in and around DC back in the late 19th century. And like a beastly beer fest. So we did that in 2012 in a parking lot that is now basically Albi.
Yeah.
In Navy Yard.
Yes.
And then we moved it to Union Market, and then we brought it back to the shadow of Nats Park. And then finally in 2017, the city let us finally do Pennsylvania Avenue. So since 17, we've been 7 city blocks, 8,000 people, 450 beers, 200 brewers, 2 stages with 6 bands, 30 food vendors, throwing the biggest party.
It's such a huge departure. It's part of your passion, but it's like such a huge departure from everything else.
From the day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. It's like, I'm like, how do we do this? But it's fun for us because we've always been just like ADD with everything. We want to do like lots of different stuff. And so the fact that we're able to do this, and we have an incredible team. Our beverage department is massive to do events like this. I mean, we probably throw 1,000 events a year at our businesses alone with the likes of.
You guys do a ton of programming.
A ton of programming. We annoy you with it,
no,
but
that
you're
does not
receptive.
annoy me. It feeds my beast.
But like that's the job. I think. So just to say, Aaron Dudley is our wine director. Nick Farrell is our spirits director. Mentioned him earlier. Tim Liu is our beer director. Bruno Simoes works with him on the beer team. We have brewers. We have Kenya who does coffee and A. But the trick for them is that
the person's name who does coffee is Kenya.
Kenya Useda. Yeah.
I met her.
She's incredible.
Yes, but I didn't know that was her name.
She's amazing. And in fact, her dad has worked at the diner with the diner group.
Okay.
For like 30 years. So she came up in restaurants. Anyways, she's incredible. But the reason we have a larger beverage team is obviously to help us with training on the staff of each of the restaurants when we do openings, creating lists. But it's also to be a separate, income opportunity for the group through these events and things like that. And so that's what they are constantly working on, and that's why we're able to do that.
For Snallygaster, what's the date?
Oh, sorry, it's October 12th.
Okay, and you can already try. There's VIP tickets.
They're almost gone, but they're still there.
Okay.
SnallygasterDC.com, and all of this is to benefit Arcadia, our nonprofit.
Right, which is an amazing nonprofit. Okay, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Okay, how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I got 4. I'm going to ask you some questions, and then we're going to wrap this baby up. Okay. When you're not eating at a neighborhood restaurant group property, what restaurant are you going to right now?
Northwest Chinese.
Okay.
Do you know that place?
No, where is it?
So my wife and daughter and I live in Cheverly, Maryland, which is right outside of DC, and not far from College Park. So on Baltimore Ave, near the university, there's a Chinese restaurant called Northwest Chinese that is incredible.
Okay.
They do amazing noodle dishes, really clean flavors, Szechuan influences, and then also they do Chinese burgers, like Panda Gourmet does as well, up on New York Avenue, which is another one of our favorites.
Huh.
It's worth going out of your way for.
Okay.
And it's in a nondescript little storefront in College Park. So
Okay.
Northwest Chinese, yeah.
All right, now, give me one of NRG's restaurants.
That I would love and go to?
Yeah, that you love and go to.
I mean, that's hard to pick.
I know.
I would say, because obviously I would say Caruso's, that goes without saying.
Right.
Everybody knows that. But we didn't mention Josephine.
Oh, no.
Which is another example of how we have, kind of pivoted post-pandemic. Columbia Firehouse, which is a longtime place in Old Town on St. Asaph Street. Amazing place. We flipped that into a beautiful French bistro and brasserie called Josephine that does incredible stuff. And our team there is outstanding. So from service to drinks to food, it is beautiful. It's nothing you wouldn't expect, which is what I love about it.
Plus it has a champagne bar.
And a champagne bar upstairs.
Now you're speaking my language. Okay. I know you do a lot of beer collabs. You've worked with the best and brightest. Maybe not all as bright as others. But if you could do a collab with anybody, who would you do one with?
Beer-wise.
Beer-wise.
It's going to sound like a cop-out because it's happening.
Okay.
But one of my dream collaborations was to work with Sierra Nevada Brewing Company.
Okay.
Sierra Nevada Brewery is one of those breweries that proves that you can be, in beer, you can be craft, independent, and small, focused, and still be big. I mean, they do 1 million barrels a year. They're a big brewery, as you know.
Right.
But they care about their people, they're stewards of the environment, and they want their beers to taste perfect every single time. So they've been a huge inspiration for me my entire career. They opened in 79, 80.
Okay.
You see them everywhere, but they are doing it right. And Church Key is celebrating its 15th anniversary in October. We've been lucky enough to create collaboration opportunities with a lot of different breweries. And in 2 weeks, we are going to Sierra Nevada to brew a beer for Church Key's 15th anniversary.
Oh my God, that's
so that was a
cool.
dream that I've had for a long time that just came true. So,
all right,
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, and in the hospitality world, we've talked a lot about trends.
Yeah.
What is the trend right now that you're kind of most excited about? What are you seeing out there that you're like, this kind of turning me on, I'm ready for it?
That is interesting. I think I would say, I don't know. I mean, one of the things I love is small, focused menus. And I see that a lot of the very best restaurants these days are, you sit down, you've heard a lot about this restaurant, and they put something in front of you that has like a dozen dishes. Then you flip over to the back and there's like 6 wines, 3 cocktails. Like, there's just so much confidence oozing out of that. And you know, as we get older and you have families and multiple children, you don't get to go out as much as you'd like. So it's kind of fun when I go to those experiences and sit down. Like, it just happened to me at Queen's English the other day. It was like, that menu is just tight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't get out as much as I used to. I'm here. I don't want to wonder. Like, you've kind of said, like, this is what we're confident in.
And I love that personally.
I love
like,
it, yeah.
I was at a great restaurant. I was at Maidon last week.
Amazing.
I love Maidon. It's delicious.
Always have, yep.
But when I look at that menu, I start like hyperventilating.
Yeah.
There is so much going on out there. So they have the tasting menu, and I'm like, done. I don't want to choose. I don't
you
want
have
to know.
because there's so many great dips and other things that you want.
Just pick it for me. Like, so I'm with you. I love these sort of high and tight menus that are making it easier for the diner. I don't need 1,000 options.
Yeah, just and frankly, you and I are the same, and I think more people are getting like this. I want to go in and just be like, just send it. Don't.
Yeah.
But what I would encourage, and I hope we can do this at our restaurants, but I would encourage people to think they can do that anywhere.
Right.
Like, we go to bars and restaurants for human interaction. If you sit down at a bar and you just sit there and you new bar, it's like, you can look at their cocktails. Some might look more interesting than others, but just saying like, okay, listen, I've got 20 minutes before dinner. I need a snack and a cocktail. You choose. And go back to looking on your phone. Like, I promise that'll be a memorable experience.
Without a doubt.
You know, and I think that's what I love. And I feel like, again, as we have to, because of rising food costs and labor costs, offer less on the menu and have fewer staff available. This might be the answer going forward.
Well, it's effective and efficient.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you're checking both boxes.
Exactly.
Right. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for coming out here to Barrel Oak. Okay, tell everybody where they can find you on Instagram and where we can find like all the neighborhood restaurant group stuff.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Son of Frang, and we have just countless Instagram handles across our group, but Neighborhood Restaurant Group is also on Instagram. You can find me all over the place, but obviously it's Snallygaster on October 12th. The biggest beer fest on the East Coast, and looking forward to Mallard coming up soon. And then if you're ever in New Orleans, check us out. Brewery St. Axe, Devil Moon Barbecue, and Junebug, which is coming up in October.
So exciting. All right, thanks for joining me. And I want to thank all of you for joining me here at Barrel Oak Winery and Brewery. It's just been 4 amazing episodes. We've been doing such amazing things out here. I'm so grateful to the team, Adriana Luca, for bringing me here and allowing this show to proceed the way we have. So much is going on in and out of the hospitality industry. Don't forget to follow me at NYCCINELLIS on all the platforms. I don't know if you're paying attention to Instagram, but I'm doing a lot of fun things, and you can find out all the details. Plus, I'll be doing a little background on Mallard, so you can check that out as well. Thanks for joining me, and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.